Today we're going to be making white bread. So we've got a pound of flour, 80 grams of oil, 10 grams of salt and 10 grams of dried fast action yeast. First thing we're going to do is add our salt and our yeast in together, the oil. And with this recipe we go half liquid to flour. So we're going to have half a pint of liquid. I'm going to do half milk, half boiling water. So a quarter of a pint of water, quarter of a pint of milk, tip that straight in. So I'm just going to mix this together with a knife first. Now you could do this in a stand mixer if you've got one, and you can just leave it beating for 10 minutes and it makes it so much easier. But I'm going to show you guys by hand. So once it starts to come together, you're going to take your hand and just work all that flour in. If you've measured it out right, it should be nice and soft, slightly tacky, but not too sticky. If it is a bit wet, you can add a little more flour. That's no problem at all. But this is just sort of just tacks to my hands. It's not sticking too much to the bowl. And we're just going to knead this for 10 minutes until it's really nice and smooth without any flour, unless it's really starting to stick. It's really easy to add more flour to a mix, but it's really hard to add any more liquid. So now my bread's nice and smooth, stretchy, slightly tacky. I'm going to pop it back in its bowl, and we're going to pop some cling film nice and tightly over the top. Now how long this takes very much depends on how warm your house is, how humid it is, and how much heat you've got into your dough. So I'm going to leave this for an hour and see how it does. If you put it somewhere warmer, say if you're working in a room somewhere, or you've got an airing cupboard or the heating's on in a certain room, pop it in there and it'll speed it up a lot. We'll come back to this in an hour. Now that it's been an hour, the dough's more than doubled in size. It's actually done a bit quicker than I expected, and we're just going to gently tease this out, not leaving any behind. Now I'm going to split mine in half. I'm going to do one in a tin and one just a loose by hand loaf. I'm just going to roughly cut this in half. So for each one, I'm just going to lightly knock it back, not by much, just like that. Now I'm folding it into the middle, like just folding it round to get really nice even shape. Once you've done that, you'll notice it'll start to tighten up again. So what I'm going to do is just roll it and sort of tease it into a lump shape like that. I'm just going to flatten it out. I'm going to get my tin, pop it down, teeny bit of flour, a little bit of flour on the bottom of this. I'm going to pop that in the bottom there. Press it into the mould, and then we're just going to cling film it again, and it'll prove out and it'll fill that mould really nicely. And for the freehand one, same again. This one you don't need to worry about putting any flour on. Just work it round. So you're just folding a little bit over at a time from each corner into the middle until you've got a nice even shape. Like so. And I'm just gonna sort of pulling it back with my hands, letting it stretch itself into that shape. Then we're going to flatten it out. If I had a bigger tin, I could do a bigger tin loaf, and you could do this as a freehand loaf, the whole mix. That'd be absolutely fine. This will probably be a bit small, but I don't want to make too much bread. So we're just going to take a tray with a teeny bit of flour on, pop it on there, and we're not going to cling film this one, because if the cling film sticks to the top, when it gets slightly moist, as it proves, you'll end up ripping the bread as you take the cling film off. So we're just going to leave them there for another hour. Before I leave this to prove, I'm going to do one last thing. Take a knife and just cut in, and I'm cutting in fairly deep into the bread. So this is it's a slightly sort of tense dough. So as it proves, if you're not careful, it'll stretch and pull. it won't rise up evenly. You can see they go in by about 2 centimetres, and it is a fairly small loaf. It's been another hour. My bread, you can tell, is really nice and improved. Feels soft. There's a little bit of a skin on it, and that'll form a nice crust. And then over here, got our tin. So you just want to really carefully peel this off at a good angle. So if you make sure it's flat back on itself as you peel it back, you won't rip the bread. I'm going to pop these both in on 180 for, I'm going to say, about 20 minutes, and we're going to see. It might take a little bit longer. It's just been 10 minutes, and I'm going to spin around my bread to make sure it gets a nice even cook. These have had the next 10 minutes. You can see they're looking nice and golden. They've got quite a firm crust on top, but that will soften as they cool. So I'm just going to pop these on a rack, just so that as they cool down, the heat doesn't make the bottom go soggy. So you can see my tin loaf's a little uneven. I should have pressed it down into the mould a bit more, but it should still taste really good.